talk to the end users, talk to the people who have implemented it and find out what they like and what they wish, if I would have known this, I might have gone a different direction. So talk to other customers that are actually using the solution.
Worried that native JD Edwards security isn't enough to protect your critical data? Curious how third-party solutions like AllOut Security can help you pass audits and prevent internal fraud. In today's episode, we'll explore why leading JD Edwards users are turning to third-party security tools and how these platforms can save you time, reduce risk, and make compliance way easier. Stick around. This episode will give you the insights you need to decide whether it's time to upgrade your JDE security strategy. Welcome to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. I'm your host, Nate Bushfield, and today we're diving into JDE Security with Brian Connor from ERP Suites. Brian, welcome again. Glad to have you back on the podcast. A recurring guest. You can add that to your resume at some point if you ever really need it again. But let's start with a quick intro. What's your role and how did you get started in the JDE security space for those of us that have not had the great pleasure of meeting you before?
Oh, thanks, Nate. Thanks for having me back on again. So as Nate said, I'm Brian Connor. I am the director of the JDE Security Practice for ERP Suites. How did I get started in the security space? It was about 12 years ago. I was a project manager for a real estate development company. They were doing shared services and security re-implementation, and I ended up taking over the role of the security subject matter expert as well as running that particular project. And I've been focused on security and compliance exclusively ever since.
Nice. Yeah, I know you've been in this space for a little while. I mean, longer than I've been here at least. But maybe probably not longer than I've been alive. It's always a good thing to ask before we start going. But anyway,
I'm not sure about that. I started this in 1995.
yeah, you're I'm a 99 kid. So
Okay.
yes, longer than I've been alive. It's good to know at least. But let's start with the
Absolutely.
basics. Start with the basics here. What are the different security options available in JD Edwards, and how do these native tools and third-party tools compare?
All right. So security options, as you said, Nate, you have native JD Edwards tools, security workbench, role relationships, that sort of thing. And you have two third-party providers that have bolt-ons. You have Q Software, which is now part of the Pathlock Group, and you have AllOut Security. They've both been around 20 years, a little bit more. And really what those are your options. So you have your native tools or you have your bolt-ons. So that's really what your options are. Or a lot of customers I've seen some where they have a CNC or a developer who creates their own interface and they do things the way they want to very specifically for their use case. But most people are going to choose either the native or use one of the third-party commercial solutions available.
Yeah, and how do those really compare to each other in terms of like, is there a big cost difference? Is there more security that comes with a third party? What does that truly look like?
Cost difference, I believe they are relatively comparable. I don't want to get into costs. If you need costs, obviously reach out to the vendors directly, and they will be more than happy to give you a quote, I'm sure. Um, but as far as what they bring to the table, they don't bring anything to JD Edwards from a security perspective that JDE doesn't already do. There's a great series of podcasts out there that Chandra and Paul Hauptkoper do, where they've done, I think, 5 or 6 episodes on security. They've kind of gotten into the nuts and bolts of it a little bit. So your third parties don't do anything more as far as securing JD Edwards that native JDE doesn't already do. Really, what the third parties bring to the table is ease of maintenance. So they make it a little bit different as far as how you create and maintain security. And the biggest thing is they bring compliance to the table.
Awesome. Yeah, and to shift the conversation to the native side, like other than obviously the ways that you just said, are there any limitations on them in terms of their security offerings?
Any limitations in the native tools?
Yes.
No, I mean, honestly, the native tools do everything that you need to do. They secure absolutely everything that you could possibly want. They do the role assignments, you have your UDO security. Um, so it does everything that you need inside of JD Edwards to secure your access. It's not always the most um, intuitive as far as going through and setting up security. But after you've done, one or two, you understand what you've got to check. I know I'm doing work for a client right now using Security Workbench, and you have to get the first one and remember: do I check the box or uncheck the box to grant the yes value for the particular item? So you do that once, and you're good.
Okay, so yeah, there's more of a training involved. It's more of a setup that people might actually have to deal with. And instead of have like a third party tool might be more intuitive or user friendly is another way that a lot of people say that. All right, that makes a lot of sense. But how do these party tools better support real world compliance, like needs like segregation of duties and even audit readiness?
Well, they provide support inside JD Edwards. Without a third party solution, if you're doing compliance, audit readiness, that sort of thing, you're writing SQL queries to pull data out and you're formatting and looking at the data outside of JD Edwards. So you're using Excel to compare access. A third party tool allows you to do that inside of JD Edwards. Effectively push button. You define what you want to look at, you submit the report, and it comes back and says, Brian has a conflict with, uh, you know, setting up a vendor and paying a vendor. So it becomes much more intuitive, easier, faster to do. You can produce reports in PDF, which auditors prefer something in a non-auditable or editable format. So coming out of the system in a PDF is much preferred for auditors.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's easier to use, it's easier to manipulate that, and especially for someone that's on maybe the outside of JD Edwards, it's in a format that they understand and they don't have to get trained on it on that side of things. I can understand how that would be easier for the outside people. But maybe that doesn't exactly like if you have in-house auditors that you regularly use, maybe that wouldn't really come up as much as like maybe those people that do focus on having third party auditors come in and help them out.
I think even with internal auditors, I've worked with a lot of companies where you have internal audit that will look at what the users have access to in the system and they go through that data because they want to understand what their potential risk points are before the external auditors write a formal assessment of that. So usually what happens is they're pulling data out. They're spending weeks going through and producing the conflict because you have to look from a JD Edwards, all the different levels of hierarchy of security, all the different roles to see, really understand what a user can do in the system. So they're pulling all of that data out, massaging it through Excel to understand, and then going back and trying to remediate any of those issues prior to sharing that information with external audit.
Yeah, of course. But what would the implementation of a third party security tool look like in I don't know, a typical JD Edwards environment?
Sure. So we'll start with the basic installation. So you've purchased the software and you want to get it loaded into your environment. Both tools, Q Software and AllOut, install in a very similar way. You have a package, much like an ESU or ASU that you install into the client. It goes into your object management workbench. You do the check-in, and then you can then start using it. The big difference on the installation side is with the PathLock solution, Q Software, they bring in um, custom business functions and significantly more tables than AllOut. AllOut does now have a couple of optional tables that you can generate and use for some of their reporting, but it's not required for 95% of what you do with that particular tool set. So, from an installation perspective, with AllOut, I can get that installed and running in your environment in roughly an hour. With Q software, it's going to take probably a full day because you've got to do the installation, you've got to do the check, and then you have to do a full package build with all of the business functions, generate the tables and everything else that goes with it before you can start utilizing the tool set. Once you've installed the tool, going in and implementing and looking at different changes and different things, they're both relatively intuitive. I'm more of an all-out advocate. I like the all-out interface much better. It's very, very simple, easy to understand for anybody. So when I've done implementations and training, having a user come in and be able to go in and immediately understand what to do and how to do it. It's typically much faster adoption rate with all out security versus the Q software tool. But I would recommend, if your choice is a third party tool or native JD Edwards, I would recommend a third party tool because you're going to get significant benefits from an interface and ease of maintenance perspective over the native JD Edwards.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I actually didn't know that about Q software. I thought that they would be very similar products in terms of upstart time. And especially for a lot of these companies that need security and they need security now. In terms of actually getting it up and running, all out seems like it's very quick, very easy, something that isn't native to JD Edwards per se, but can integrate very well with JD Edwards in your actual system. Obviously, Q software is still a very good option. It might just take a little bit longer, so you might have some security concerns at that day, at least.
The implementation and the upgrade is it's a longer process for Q software. It does use a lot of extra tables. One of the big differentiators between the two solutions is All Out just writes to the native JD Edwards tables only. As we said, there's a couple of tables they may use for reporting where they'll output data into those files for future reporting. But as far as maintaining and managing your security, with Q software, you write everything to the Q tables. And when you're ready to publish it, then you publish that and it takes it from the QSoft tables and pushes it to the JD Edwards table. So there's an interim step. They're both built inside the JD Edwards tool set. So it's not like you're going outside of JD Edwards to do your security. It's just a different approach to doing it.
Yeah, it's like a plugin that we all use these days. It's a very simple thing, very easy to use for both of them, honestly. But how do these tools support ongoing change control, especially during role redesigns and company restructures?
You bet. Uh, so we'll start with QSoft. Because QSoft uses external tables, everything is built outside of the JD Edwards security table. So you're looking at things in a non-live environment. So you can create your security. You can run some SOD over that before you've actually applied it to the users and kind of get an understanding of what's there before you build it. But you can't really test it until you've actually pushed that data into the JD Edwards table so your users can start using it. All out, you're using the native JD Edwards tables. From a change control perspective, I really like doing a multiple table configuration. So in JDE, they give you a lot of options and a lot of tools. So you can create dual security tables, one for production, one for non-production. So you can make your changes in non-production. You can have your users test and validate. The one really nice feature of all that security is their change control, where it tracks all of your changes that you've made to security, and you can implement a review and approval process, so you can double check that a user has tested somebody has approved it, and effectively push button promote that from non-production to production. So you're not doing dual entry. One of the downsides of dual security tables without this in place is you have to enter it twice, non-production and production, and you've got to make sure you carry everything that you've done in non-production forward, which, if it's been a while or there's a lot of changes, we're all people. We forget things or something gets missed out of the Excel spreadsheet. So it becomes a little more difficult to make sure 100% is moved up. AllOut eliminates that with their change control process where it's push button. You promote it, it pushes it up, and not only that, you get an output that says, "Here's what I moved from non-production to production," in a PDF output. So if the auditors ask what changed and when, you can just hand them that output, and you're covered.
Yeah, so there's a realm of transparency with it. And throughout the entirety of this podcast, we've talked about transparency and clean data. So really it's a two-pronged approach there. But it is very interesting to see that, yeah, like when you're going to an auditor, you're not trying to lie to them. I like all the auditors that I've talked to in my day. I've never tried to lie to them, but there are some times where we are human. Like we miss things. There are things that are wrong in some entry. I accidentally added a zero or something like that. It's the simple things that you wouldn't really think about, but I'm glad that we have a security software that might actually catch things.
So
So what are the day-to-day benefits from a maintenance and troubleshooting perspective for the native side, but also the third-party tools?
So on the native side, troubleshooting and day-to-day maintenance becomes a little bit more cumbersome. So you're using security workbench. So going in and making changes to security. So somebody has sales order entry and they have the ability to delete, and you need to remove the ability to delete sales orders for a big group of users. So you have to go in one at a time. And the methodology in Security Workbench, it works. It just can take a little while longer. It's a drag and drop with the, as we mentioned in the beginning, you have the checkbox unchecked for a yes and you check it for a no. So you have to go in and check the delete box and then drag it from or revise the security to make that delete yes to a delete no. So day-to-day maintenance, absolutely you can do it. And if you're doing a whole bunch, it does go relatively quickly. You can get in and get in a rhythm and get things done fairly quickly. Um, with All Out, we have their security super grid, they call it, where you can load from the QBE line the program that you want to take a look at, P4210 for sales order. And it loads the yes and no values in a grid, and you can just simply change a yes to a no, and arrow down, and then hit update, and everything is saved. So significantly faster, and it allows you to search, not just to search and find the issues, but then resolve them quickly.
Okay. Yeah, so it's obviously similar, but very different in certain ways, especially when you're
Yeah.
looking at a third party versus an actual native side of things. But let's talk about the cost. Everybody loves to know the actual cost, the X's and O's. And I know that we're not going to talk about the actual rollout for all out because it can differ. And with Q software, it can differ on what the businesses are looking for. But from an ERP suite standpoint, what would be the true cost of adapting a platform like AllOut Security? Like talking time and even resources that people would have to put up.
Right. Right. So, one thing I think is important to cover is because of how the two solutions approach how they manage security, all out using native tables and Q software using the Q tables. If you're using Q software, you have to use Q software. If you go make changes in the native JDE Edwards tables, which you still can do, you run the risk of you're now out of sync with your Q software setup. So the next time you do a build from Q to the tables, it's going to overwrite what you just did in the native tables. With all out, it doesn't matter which one you use. If you use the security workbench or the security supergrid, it's all the same table. So there's no risk of overwriting or losing information regardless of which way you go and modify the data. So I think that's an important distinction. And it, you know, I guess on the downside for AllOut, it makes it a little less sticky because you don't have to use AllOut as you go forward. You can use either one. And, AllOut on the other side has to provide more value because you can use the native tools versus just having to use their own. Um, but as far as implementation costs go, one of the things that we've done at ERP Suites is we've put together a fixed fee price schedule for some of the basic items. So we've got training, we've got installation. AllOut has recently come out with their UX one. So they've built a lot of dashboards that automatically give you a graphical view of the state of your security, compliance, role assignments, critical program access, all of that. So implementing those types of things, we've done a fixed fee just to make it easy. So if you contact one of our salespeople and you say, "Hey, I want these three things to be done," they can get you a quote out in a matter of minutes because we've looked at that. We know what we're doing with it, and we can get that done very quickly for you.
Mm. Yeah, and in terms of the actual time that would go into it, how long are these training sessions that you typically see? I mean, obviously, every business is different. It depends on how many people are truly there. But what would that training structure kind of look like?
It, as you said, so we offer a package in terms of the number of days. So if we're doing training, it's usually 2, 3, or 4 days. And the number of days depends on the experience level of the people that we're going to be training. If they're relatively new, they've never really done security. Let's say you've outsourced your CNT and your business analysts are going to be taking over doing all of your security. They need to understand. So we'll start with some of the basics of how JDE is configured, what the architecture looks like, what all the different security types are. A lot of what Chandra and Paul covered in their podcasts. We go into some more detail on that so you understand what exactly you're getting and what are the options if you're trying to accomplish certain tasks in your system. Then we can go into detail with the compliance and audit reporting. We'll do, how to set things up. We go through and do training, and this is more common now than it used to be. A lot of companies need a little more assistance, but they still want to own the security process. They don't necessarily want somebody to come in and black box it and just come in and sit behind the curtain and do everything for them. They want to understand what is happening. So we're doing more strategic guidance and assistance with customers now where we'll come in, we'll do the training, we'll go through what the process looks like, work through the first couple of scenarios with them and make sure they understand what they're doing, and then let them go on their way. And we're here as a resource if they have questions, a week later, a month later, a quarter, it doesn't really matter. If you reach out and it's like, "Hey, Brian, I forgot, how do I do this?" Or "What's the best way to solve this solution?" It's a quick email or we'll do a quick WebEx and walk through it with them, make sure they understand it. So we want to be there, whatever you choose as a client, whether you want us to do the whole thing, or if you want us to be more of a train the trainer approach and make sure that your people have the skills necessary to fully leverage the solution that they have.
Yeah. And obviously, it's great to know that instead of just, I don't know. I feel like there are some companies out there that are like, oh, yeah, we're going to tell them this much so that when they come to us, they have to pay more to figure out actually how to use
Right.
their server and are a little bit scummy that way. It's good to
No,
know
I
that we're not really like that.
Yeah, one of the things in the JDE community that I really like is, this idea of share the knowledge. We've got In Focus coming up in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I think. And the whole point behind all of this is for customers and vendors to share what they know with the rest of the community. So I really take that to heart. And if a customer wants us to come in and do all the work, absolutely we can do that. I've been doing this for a long time, so I can likely do it a lot faster than they can. But if they want to own it and they want to get used to it and be able to do that, absolutely. I just finished a project 3 months ago for a company that wanted that approach. Their team did phenomenal work in a lot of different areas. I don't want to say their name without their permission, but it's a company in the Caribbean, and their team did fantastic work in getting everything done. And they had the occasional question. Great, I'll help them out with that. But the goal is for you to be self-sufficient. That's really what we want out of it.
Yeah, man. I'm actually going to InFocus for the first time ever. I'm very excited about it. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun because I haven't really been around a lot of JD Edwards people recently, at least. I've been to a few user groups and different stuff like that for different video stuff. But anyways, back to the topic on hand. What are common mistakes or misunderstandings do you see when customers first move to third-party security?
Um, I think the biggest mistake that I see, and it's not just with third party, is not having a plan.
Mm.
You need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. Wherever you're going, you need to know what your destination is. You need to understand what the options are. What can I do with JDE security? There's a lot of different things that you can do that, option B might be more effective than option A. So part of this is setting out your strategy and design of how are we going to accomplish what we want to accomplish, and then understanding the strengths of the tools you choose, whether it's AllOut or QSoft, or what is it that each of these tools brings to the table, and how can I incorporate that in my plan, and making sure you have that plan documented and understood by the business users, by your business analysts, by your technical team before you actually make any changes. You've really got to have that nailed down as step one.
Yeah, and you would think that that'd be a simple thing, but when it comes to these planning things, and yes, we can sit here all day and say, "Oh, plan, 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 need to do it." We even struggle with planning certain things. Everybody does. It's a company across all companies out there. It's hard to plan for these things. But if you do set a strict schedule, or at least something that you really believe that you are going to need in terms of an actual idea and plan going forward, it will make this process as simple as it could possibly be. And that's what
Absolutely.
everyone's looking for. Everybody wishes the world was as simple as that. So yes, make sure to plan accordingly. Because yes, it might only take an hour or two to set up all out security, but the planning behind it and then the training after, you have to have a plan. You have to have it in place for this to be the most seamless transition that you can possibly have. But I know we've talked about it throughout this episode. It's been a lot of all out versus Q software and whatever they're called now. But for a company evaluating these two third party solutions, what are some practical differences that they should consider?
Um, Practical differences is going to be ongoing usage of it. As I mentioned before, whether you're using the native Jade Edwards tools or the third party solution, if you've implemented Q software and somebody new comes in and starts making changes to your security configuration, and then your main security person comes in and publishes some changes that they've made in QSoft, and it completely overwrites. So you need to understand what you're getting with each solution to make sure that you put the controls in place within your company to make sure that if you're using, um, especially if you're using Q software, that you only use Q software. You don't want to go into your native tools to do any of the work. It needs to all go through the tool set to make sure that it's managed, audited. They've got their own audit tables in there so that you understand exactly who did what and when. So it needs to go through that solution. Um, and then, for everything else, as far as an upgrade goes, have found that it is significantly less time intensive for all out. Upgrading all out from one version to the next, even if it's been a couple of years in between releases, is effectively the same as a fresh install. So we're looking at an hour, 2 hours tops with Q software, especially if it's been multiple releases. You've got a lot of table conversions you have to do. You've got all your business functions, so it becomes um, a much more intrusive upgrade process. I won't say intrusive. It becomes a much more uh, involved upgrade process because you have to upgrade all of the queue tables from the previous version to the current version. And and what they have there works. It's just there's a lot more steps that you have to go through versus just logging in, installing the package, and then being able to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And when someone's looking at that, they hear one thing: flexibility. Flexibility is something that you don't really get in a lot of different upgrades and different applications. There isn't a lot of flexibility when it comes to what other third-party tools are doing when you are looking to upgrade. So when you're looking at this, yeah, all out, yeah, you might have to spend like an hour, but that's way better than having an entire day to go through all of your lists and tables and everything through Q software just to have an upgrade that you're already spending on. So it's a smaller cost probably in that way of just less time you have to spend training people on new models.
Right.
Getting
And
the upgrade. Go,
yeah,
go.
all honesty, I spend more time researching and planning the Q software upgrade than I do implementing the all out upgrade.
Which is always hilarious to think about, where it's just, it is easier. And look, Q software, there are a lot of great things that you can utilize with it. If you don't want to be
Absolutely.
in your JDE system when you're dealing with your security, there's a lot of great things that software can give you. All out's ease of use and flexibility is just a different way of looking at security with still using that native side into it, which is very insightful, really. But
Right.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You got some final remarks?
I think the difference is it's understanding how your company works and understanding how that software solution is going to fit. Does it fit culturally with how we do things in our company?
Mhm.
I've talked to customers that try to make AllOut work like QSoft. Well, AllOut is not QSoft. And if you're trying to make one solution act like the other solution, you should probably just go buy the other solution because they're better at doing what they do. QSoft is really good at being QSoft, and they do a lot of great things. So understand how your company works, understand how the software supports how you do things in your company. And I would say, yeah, obviously, yes, you want to talk to each of the vendors, but I'd say you want to come to the user group meetings, whether it's Quest, the InFocus or Blueprint or your local rugs, and talk to customers that use the solution, not just the vendors. Vendors are always going to say we have the best thing in the world, right? And that's what we do. We're vendors. Talk to the end users, talk to the people who have implemented it and find out what they like and what they wish, if I would have known this, I might have gone a different direction. So talk to other customers that are actually using the solution.
Could not have said it better myself. But if this episode got you thinking about JDE security, don't wait until your next audit to act. Head over to ERPSuites.com to talk with Brian or another member of our security team that you've seen throughout all of this podcast process, and others that are still on this team. Will help you evaluate the right fit. But that's the end of this episode. Thanks for tuning in for Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. A huge shout out to you, Brian, for sharing this insight. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, leave a like, and share this episode with your team. Until next time, secure smarter, work faster, and modernize your ERP. Thank you.